The road to the Stanley Cup continues for the Dallas Stars, and they find themselves in the Western Conference Final for the second straight season. This year brings a new challenge as the Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid roll into town. Welcome to the official Stars vs. Oilers series preview.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans, and welcome to this special crossover edition of Locked On Stars and Locked On Oilers as we get you prepared for the Western Conference Final. I'm Joey Erickson, former producer of 105 Through the Fan. Please be sure to subscribe. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. And as always, thank you so much for making us a part of your day and making us your first listen. The time has finally arrived. The Western Conference Final gets underway tonight in Dallas, and I was able to catch up with Nick from Locked On Oilers to discuss all things ahead of this Western Conference Final. We get into Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, how the Stars are hopefully going to be able to tame them to some degree. Who has the advantage in net? Who has the advantage defensively? All the nitty-gritty details you need to know ahead of this Western Conference Final. I'm super pumped up for this series. The next few weeks are going to be insane. And of course, there is a Stanley Cup final trip on the line here in the next, 7 to 10 days, which makes it even more riveting. I won't keep you hanging much longer. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Without further ado, here is your official Western Conference Final series preview. Welcome to the official Western Conference Final preview here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's a pleasure to be with Nick here of Locked On Oilers. I'm Joey Erickson of Locked On Stars, and here we go. The Western Conference Final is right around the corner. The Edmonton Oilers and Dallas Stars. It feels like the late 90s all over again, Nick. And I was just born in 99, so I missed on some of the heyday of those rivalries and of those amazing series. But this is shaping up to be a thriller. Nick, thank you for joining us. How has the Stanley Cup playoffs treated you so far?
As someone on the East Coast covering a Pacific time zone team, it's been a little interesting. Not a lot of sleep, but it's been fun. And the Oilers are here. I've talked a lot this week. Conference finals don't come around all that often.
No.
The Oilers have been to 4 conference finals since 1990. It just doesn't happen all that often. So just getting here, it's unsatisfying to not come away with the trophy, but it also feels weird to say if you were one of the last 4 teams standing, it wasn't a successful season.
Yeah, I concur with you as well. I've said it multiple times over the last few days. Stars fans, enjoy it. This does not come around all the time. I know we've been here 3 of the past 5 seasons, but there was a stretch there. It's really, really hard to make it to this point. And it sets up for some great theater moving forward. So I'm really curious on how this series is certainly going to shape out. Obviously, you have the superstars for Edmonton, and you have a Dallas team that's pretty deep. Not a ton of flash, really, but they've gotten through some really, really tough opponents. I would love to hear your overall thoughts and analysis of the first 2 rounds for Edmonton. Made pretty quick work of the Kings, and then a battle to say the least against Vancouver in 7 games. And I give Coach Knobloch a lot of credit there. He had to kind of conjure up some things, and he had to handle the goaltending situation, and boom, the Oilers win game 6 in 7 to find themselves here. I also want to touch, I'll let you ramble here. I'll ramble first. These are 2 of the hottest teams post All-Star break that find themselves in this situation. 2 of the hotter teams within the league. And maybe it's not a huge surprise that these 2 teams are here. But anyways, your overall thoughts on the first 2 rounds for the Oilers?
They have gotten by on superstar power, obviously, and their special teams. Those are the only 2 pillars. Most teams, we break it down into a tripod of special teams, goaltending, and 5-on-5. The Oilers have got decent 5-on-5. It's not overwhelming because their depth is not great, but it's good enough. Their top six is good enough that they win those minutes, and then they tread water at the bottom six. And then the special teams has been the best in the playoffs. Both their power play and penalty kill are, the penalty kill is first, their power play is first. You get those two, you can survive 880 goaltending. There is not another team in these playoffs that could survive with the goaltending they've had this year. Just, I went and did the math for if you put 888 save percentages into each of the three other teams left, no other team could have sustained that based on how the special teams has gone and based on how the 5-on-5 has gone. So they've been able to make do. Vancouver did them favors. I know I've had more than one Oilers fan comment on a video or tweet at me, hey man, can't you give the Oilers a little credit? Yes, you have to take them up on a favor. If someone gives you a favor, it's not a finished deal unless you take them up on it. So yes, the Canucks were not great, especially in game 6 or 7, but the Oilers had to put that away. That was not a guarantee. Especially, and you pointed it out, going to Pickard, who has basically no experience in the who had no experience in the playoffs coming up to this point, a real gutsy call, breaking up your defensive pairs that you had most of the season and juggling Desharnais up, juggling Desharnais down with Nurse and bringing CC up to play with Kulak. It was really, gutsy decision making at a point where they needed to have it. They were down 3-2 in the series and they had to find a way, and they made it happen.
Yeah, and you take Corey Perry out as well. I mean, he has a Stanley Cup pedigree. Yeah, like he made decisions and look, as much as we would love here to tout how amazing the Stars are and Oilers are constantly to get to this point, you need some luck to go your way. And look at the Stars in the Colorado series. Nichushkin gets taken out in the middle of the round. Taves misses that game 4 in Colorado, and they were just defeated. And the Stars took advantage of it. Like you mentioned, with Brock Besser being out in game 7, Edmonton went out and took that game on the road. And the Stars did the same thing in game 4, a Colorado team that was very, very defeated. And they almost frankly handed them a win. You only have to win 4, and they gave them a fourth of it because it was a real gut punch when you lose somebody like Nichushkin, who was leading all goal scorers at that point in the playoffs, and then Devon Taves is their second best defenseman behind a generational player in Cale Makar. So you need some luck to go your way, certainly. And yeah, Dallas took advantage of it, and Edmonton took advantage of it as well. So I would love to hear your thoughts as well on Skinner and Pickard. Do you think maybe they kind of roll along with this tandem, or do you just go to Skinner, who looked pretty nice in game 7, even though I think a lot of us could say Vancouver probably should have tested him a bit more early in the contest instead of the last 8 minutes?
It's a fascinating question. I think the comp you would use is kind of like if you have a sketchy starting quarterback in football who turns the ball over a lot, and you go to your backup and he leads you down the field, you win the game. I think you can only push that button once or twice.
Yeah.
I don't think you can go to a guy who just doesn't have the track record. Like, you go and look at the numbers. Pickard's last time as a full-time starter, 2015, 2016. We're talking 8-9 years ago. That's a very different NHL. We're talking almost a full power play less opportunity per game. We're talking almost half a goal less per game. And the game they won with Pickard, he didn't have to do a lot. He only had to make, I think, 19 saves in that game. As you mentioned, same thing with Skinner, where the games they won, Skinner didn't have to do a whole lot. And that's kind of the Oilers' secret sauce here. Don't play as little defense as you can. And when your goalie only has to make 20 to 25 saves, you can ask a replacement level goalie to do that. Anything more than that, you're going to have a really tough time. And that's kind of where I think a lot of the odds for this series, when you look at some of the series prices at the various books, or you look at the statistical models, that's where the favoritism for the Stars is, because Ottinger's great. Ottinger, when he's on, he's one of the 5 best in the world. And we're talking about that in comparison to somebody who was under 890 the first 2 rounds. That's really the most glaring difference between these two teams.
Yeah, I wonder where the difference is going to lie, right? Is it going to be goaltending? Is it going to be the depth for Dallas produces more? Of course, McDavid and Draisaitl are going to get their points. They're going to get their looks, albeit Stars have defended Connor McDavid really well recently. But that's the regular season. The Stanley Cup playoffs is a totally different animal, and him and Draisaitl are lighting the world ablaze. So how will that work? Can the supporting cast for the Oilers match up to what Dallas you would think is going to produce? There's just a lot of different scenarios that could play out. Special teams, I think, for me, is the number one key for Dallas if they want to get out of this series. They cannot get themselves into penalty trouble. Colorado had a fantastic power play, and the Stars got a very, very good look at it. The Oilers is a whole nother ball game, and it is so deadly. So can Dallas stay out of the box? Because I think at 5-on-5, I think the Stars are going to have a slight advantage just with the way they can roll four lines, and that's the way Pete DeBoer likes to play, right? He just likes to roll four lines. He likes to roll all six defensemen. It's nice that maybe Niels Lundqvist will not be in the lineup, so they have Petrovic or whoever else can eat up at least maybe 10 to 15 minutes a night. You can play Tanev and Miro straight up against McDavid as much as humanly possible to try to limit them to the best. And then you kind of have to live with the results. I think if you're Pete DeBoer, and I'm sure every coach in the National Hockey League goes into a game against the Oilers like, well, let's just make somebody other than 97 and 29 beat us, right? It's really, really hard to do, but you have to find a way to do that. So I wonder where the difference is going to lie. Do you have an inkling of maybe where one team can pull away if this certain thing happens?
At 5-on-5, it's the non-Draisaitl minutes. McDavid definitely nursing something, no idea what, but he's been shying away from contact a little bit more. He hasn't been engaging on puck battles as much. So the Draisaitl minutes are probably the key to this series, because if they are close at 5-on-5 and the special teams is the differentiation point, then you would lead towards Edmonton. Yeah. But if it leans Dallas at 5-on-5, and then special teams are close, you lean the goaltending for Dallas. That's your 2 out of 3. There is enough. The Oilers have enough high-end talent that they can make up for not having as much depth, but you can only do that for so long in a playoff series, because these guys, the minutes are really starting to accumulate. I know Heiskanen is up there for time on ice for you guys, but you look at the Oilers' top 4 guys, when we're talking McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent, Hopkins, they play a lot of minutes for forwards. And then Bouchard leads the team in time on ice at 24.5 minutes a game. They cannot, I don't think it's feasible to ride 4 or 5 guys that hard, because at some point they're going to hit a physical wall.
Yeah, I think that was a problem Colorado ran into some degree in Game 6, where McKinnon and McCall were playing a ton of minutes, and the longer that game went, it benefited Dallas. The Stars were just able to hang around for the first 2 periods, as it was an onslaught by Colorado. They could have been up by a couple of goals, and then maybe we're talking about a Game 7. But Dallas hung around. They get the equalizer. And then as you mentioned, they were riding those top guys consistently, and they already had to do that in Game 5 because it was a must-win situation for them. And I think McKinnon played 8 more minutes than the leading Stars forward in Game 6. I think Robertson played somewhere around maybe 24 minutes or something, and McKinnon played 8 more minutes. And you could tell he was gassed. He, of course, still has a motor, and he's going to do phenomenal things, but he was gassed by the end of that. And so maybe that is where a point of maybe contention here in this series is, if the series goes 6 or 7 games, how much can Knoblauch ride Draisaitl and McDavid? You'd think maybe that has to lean in the Stars' favor. So, I mean, it's just exciting to even think about just what this matchup is going to be. One of the best matchups in hockey, I think, is a world-class defenseman against the best player in the world. So watching like Miro against McDavid, and even Tanev, because I think Tanev against McDavid is a different animal. McKinnon, he plays at a great speed, but McDavid's a different level. So it's a different challenge. So I'm really, really curious on how Pete DeBoer is going to attack McDavid and Draisaitl specifically, because Tanev played straight up against Eichel. McKinnon did a wonderful job. Does he stay with that, or does he have Miro, who has, a little bit more mobility? Who knows? I discussed this on yesterday's episode, and I had a guest on. They said, why fix it? It's worked perfectly at this point. And Tanev has been a wonderful acquisition for the Stars. And it kind of works out in some degree that the Oilers are here, because Edmonton, they wanted Tanev. If you think about someone that could really add some depth on the back end for Edmonton, it would be Chris Tanev. So both of these teams are very similar. So I'm super excited to see where it all plans out. So, let's get into some more key players. Obviously, we know the McDavid and Draisaitl, so maybe I can't ask you about them. We'll have to ask about some unsung heroes for this Oilers squad, even though at this time of year, you need your big boys to be your big boys. But let's jump into some key players here in just a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. There is no I in team, but there is one in Indeed, and that's the hiring platform you need to build yours. When you're hiring, you need Indeed. Indeed is the hiring platform where you can attract, interview, hire, all in one place. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites searching for candidates with the right skills, Indeed's a powerful hiring platform that can help you do it all. They streamline hiring with powerful tools that find you matched candidates. With Instant Match, over 80% of employers get quality candidates whose resume on Indeed matches their job description the moment they sponsor a job, according to Indeed Data US. So go ahead and get Indeed. It's the hiring platform that matches you with quality candidates instantly, so you don't have to spend a ton of money looking for candidates. Indeed makes it simple, and you can do it efficiently. So join more than 3 million businesses worldwide that need to hire, and Indeed will help you hire great talent fast. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Offer good for a limited time. Claim your $75 credit now at Indeed.com/lockedon. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Alrighty, here we go. Some key players in this series. I'll just go ahead and begin for the Stars specifically. And we don't know if he's going to be good enough to go for game number 1 tonight, but Roope Hintz feels like a key cog in this entire series. If Hintz is healthy enough, then you feel, well, you have someone that can sort of match McDavid to some degree. Not many can match him. He did skate extensively yesterday. That's the word that was used, extensively. Who knows what that means? He's labeled as day-to-day. The Stars have a defenseman, Jani Hakanpää, that's been day-to-day for the last 70 days. So at this time of year, we don't know. So Roope feels like a really, really key Stars forward here in this series, just because if he's healthy enough to go, then it kind of moves everybody back into place. DeBoer's had to really shuffle and juggle up lines at points during this playoff run to get some offense going. And fortunately enough, they have been, because you can just move Wyatt Johnston wherever, and he's going to produce for you, which really helps out. So I think Hintz for the Stars is going to be huge. And I'd also throw someone out there like Matt Duchene. He scores that big goal, finally has that big moment in Colorado. Hadn't really had a great postseason probably in his eyes, but he finally gets that huge goal, the series clincher. Does that do something for his confidence? Because Matt Duchene has felt like an X factor all year. And boy, if he can have a series where he's just creating havoc and just creating chances and starting to find his scoring touch, Dallas can be really, really dangerous. And I feel like I say that about everybody. Well, if they get this guy going, but
it's true,
it really
though.
Feels that
it's
way.
True.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, I think about it schematically in my head. How are the Oilers going to attack? Because they typically like to load up, where if McDavid's out there, they typically like to have Bouchard and Ekholm out there with him. Okay. Yeah. If you're going to load all of that up on one line, what pair are you going to feel most comfortable playing with Leon? And then from a Stars perspective, who are you going to match up with what? Because that's the biggest difference here in talent for me is if everybody's healthy on the Stars and they're running Sagan, Dadonov, Duchene as their third line, that's going to skate circles around the McLeod line. And I like McLeod. He's fast in a straight line. The Oilers' bottom six hasn't been bad. Like chances wise, expected goals wise, they've done a decent enough job of not having to play a lot of defense, cycling the puck. But those guys are not going to score goals in the way a Duchene can, the way a Tyler Seguin can. That was the one thing that really jumped out to me at various points is just the Stars come in waves. Vegas was really good at that for an extended period of time. For much of that first iteration up till they won the Cup last year, it was four lines that were just constantly churning over where even if they didn't get the clean zone entry, dump it in, go get it.
Yeah.
I think that's somewhere in this series. The Oilers are going to have a hard time. I think the Stars' willingness to play dump and chase because they're fast, because they have so many pesky net front guys. You mentioned Wyatt Johnston. I would throw Stankoven in there as well, where they're just always buzzing. They're always around the net front. And key players, I said Bouchard before, and I'll say it again. I have numbers for you to bear this out.
Yeah.
56% of the scoring chances, 62% of the shots, 68% of the goals, 61% of the expected goals, 65% of the high danger. That's with Bouchard on the ice.
Wow.
Without him, 44% of the scoring chances, 46% of the shots, 37% of the goals, 42% of the expected goals, 42% of the high danger. The non-Bouchard minutes are probably what determines this series because he's been arguably the best defenseman in the entire playoffs. Like if you were going to give out the Conn Smythe right now, it would probably be him. And I know that sounds crazy to say when Draisaitl's playing so out of his mind.
Yeah.
But Bouchard's essential here. I mean, this is the biggest difference between the Oilers this year and the Oilers 2 years ago. They got to that conference final against Colorado and they got swept out of the bit. They couldn't beat Pavel Francois in that conference final, where Colorado, that team did go on to win the Cup, beat a dynastic Tampa Bay team. But you're telling me you couldn't score enough on Pavel Francois to get 6-7 games? That's the difference here. Bouchard is one of the 5-10 best in the world. I think Miro's got a longer track record. I think Miro deserved to be a Norris finalist this year. It's neither here nor there, but schematically, matchups-wise, the Oilers and Stars top six should be awesome. The matchups are great. I know you mentioned Tanev. Him and Lindell are great together.
Yeah.
Him and Anton Lindell. Not Anton Lindell. That's the Panthers guy. Essel Lindell, excuse me. A lot of hockey players floating around my brain this time of year. But the Stars' second defensive pair being as good as it is, I think that's a really big disparity here where anytime Bouchard's not on the ice, it's just Oilers fans sitting on their hands. It's very stressful.
Yeah, and Bouchard can kind of be the straw that stirs the drink in a lot of ways on the power play, especially, right, with the way he quarterbacks it. And he does a lot of the details that go unnoticed, right? And Miro's a case for that. And, I don't know how many Norris finalists Miro is going to have in his career just because he's not going to be a guy that lights it up offensively in the regular season. He did a lot for himself here going up against Makar, who's touted as number one, and frankly outplayed him. I mean, outplayed him for a series. Makar had some spectacular games. I'm not taking anything away from him because he is just phenomenal and a world-class player. But Miro for that 6 games was more consistent and better consistently in an entire series. So I think that will do some good for him moving forward when it comes to some of the Norris Trophy conversation, because it'll be hard for him to get a ton of votes if he's not in somewhere that 80-point range a year. And that's not necessarily his game. I think he has a potential to do it. I don't know if it's something he really subscribes to in a lot of ways. And I love how you kind of pointed out the Vegas series in Colorado. And this is one thing that I think the Stars have done really good through the first 2 rounds is they've gone into each game or a series with a certain approach to how they want to do it, and they don't stray away from it too much. Against Vegas, it was pretty obvious, hey, we're just going to lock it down in front of our own net. We are going to take away the middle of the rink, just like Vegas did to us last year. We're going to give them a taste of their own medicine. And then when we get some opportunities to stretch the ice, we can create off the rush to some degree. Colorado, a little bit different story where tactically it was a different challenge. Colorado's a bit hectic. They want to fly up and down the rink, and Dallas had to adapt and try to shut down some of that speed on the outside. And as you mentioned, Dallas hasn't been content with carrying the puck in on the offense. They have been content with throwing pucks in deep, and their forecheck has been huge, especially against Vegas. Just a hard forecheck, getting defensemen to have to turn around and go get the puck, chase them, and then finishing checks, finishing plays, all the little stuff, sticks in lanes, body on body, just the little things that can wear on a team throughout a series. I think Dallas has done an excellent job of staying within themselves. And it'll be another challenge to do that against Edmonton when they get rolling, right? And they can draw a ton of penalties when they do that. You have to be able to stay structured and stay sound. That's one thing I think Dallas has done great. They seem very, very comfortable in their own skin. Do you see that some with Edmonton through the first two rounds, where you feel like they just seem more comfortable in the style of game that's being played in a certain game or series?
I think Edmonton has been a little up and down. I think their series against LA went a lot better than they thought it would, frankly.
Yeah.
I think the worst game they played in that series, they won 1-0, and they had no business winning that game. The one game they lost in overtime. They very well could have swept LA. And then they sat around for a few days, and Vancouver was coming off of really tight, really close games against Nashville where neither team could really score. And that first game, Edmonton looked awful. They looked slow, and we're talking about Edmonton looking slow. And it was very weird in that series, at least in the early stages, that Edmonton was genuinely not faring well when the game was going fast. Vancouver was playing really well when they were using their speed. They were going from defense to offense quickly. And I think that's something I worry about from an Oilers perspective in this series, because you mentioned it. They're content with going to make the defensemen play defense and winning those battles down low. And when Nurse or Ceci has to put their back to the play, recover the puck in the corner, turn around and transition, the Oilers' cheat code is they typically have their forwards coming back, or their forwards come back, and that first pass is really short. It's usually only to the circles where it's only 15 or 20 feet. And if the Stars are able to forecheck as aggressively with as much speed as they have, I think that's a real genuine problem for the Oilers defensively, because the Oilers, when they're at their best, they're going defense to offense really quickly and not being stuck in their own end. But when you make Nurse, when you make Ceci, when you make Kulak turn around, try and get that first breakout pass, the Stars are going to win foot races. That's the key. That's something I do genuinely worry about, as how does this get out of hand for the Oilers, where it's not really something they can make a series of. It's if they have to play too much defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. Wow, this has been great stuff. This has been fantastic stuff. This is great stuff for a lot of Stars and Oilers fans to chew on here ahead of game one. There's always little intricacies of every single team and strengths and weaknesses, and at this point of the year, it's just like the smallest of margins can sometimes make the difference, and sometimes you gotta get some lucky bounces. I mean, for Dallas too, they got to feel pretty grateful to get here, as in game 7, the Vegas Golden Knights missed like 2 empty nets, like 2 pretty wide open nets. Marchessault hits the pipe, and now you're here. So it's pretty crazy that that's just how it is sometimes, is the smallest of margins. Alrighty. Well, with all that in mind, let's jump into maybe some final key stats, and then we have to give everybody what they want, our final series predictions for the Western Conference Final, and we'll do that in just a moment. Okay. The final segment here on the special crossover edition of Locked On Stars and Locked On Oilers. Appreciate everybody hopping on with me and Nick today. This has been a lot of fun, and a lot of fun to do these throughout the playoffs with all the respective hosts of the Locked On Podcast Network. I will say I've never met a bad host, so I've always had a wonderful relationship with each one I've ran into. And Nick, no difference. You're up there, man. You absolutely are. You're top 5. Okay. A key stat I want to throw out there for Dallas, and I've mentioned it multiple times. The Stars fans are probably tired of hearing it to some degree, but I think it's huge. At 5-on-5, Chris Tanev against Jack Eichel straight up, the Stars had a 3-0 advantage. Against Nathan MacKinnon, I want to say it was over 60 minutes at 5-on-5 straight up. Well, the Stars were up 3-1. if Tanev can do that to some degree against McDavid, you have to like the Stars' chances. If they're up against McDavid or even Draisaitl, Dallas has to be feeling pretty good about themselves. So that's my key number, because as you mentioned, Tanev and Lindell can be that shutdown defensive pairing. And they're going to need him again, but are minutes going to catch up to them, right? How many times TNT or ESPN has showed the time on ice, average time on ice leaders in the playoffs, and it's like 4 of the 5 are Stars defensemen. Hopefully with Petrovic or whoever's going to kind of fill in as that 6th defenseman can kind of eat up some more minutes for Dallas, which will take some pressure off the Miros of the world, and hopefully they don't have to play. You would like a few blowouts, maybe. That way you don't have to play everybody a ton, but we know that's not going to happen this time of year. So that is, I think, my overarching stat that I'm going to keep in mind throughout this series. Do you have one for Edmonton? I know Bouchard, you already kind of maybe gave out your best one.
I got
Bouchard,
2.
But
I got 2 more for you.
Okay,
I got
great.
2 more for you. All right. Number 1. The Oilers are 7-3 in the playoffs when they score at least once on the power play.
Okay.
So, as we said, special teams important. And then number 2, Leon Draisaitl has been on the ice for 32 goals for in all situations. When you include power play and even strength, the Oilers have scored 32 goals when he's been on the ice. Undoubtedly, the single most impactful player for them at 5-on-5. If McDavid gets these 3 days off and feels better, then we can have a real talk. But I struggle. I've spent a lot of today in preparation for this episode trying to think of how I can make a case for how the Oilers can win this series. And you would typically say, as the slight underdog, you need your goalie to steal you a game. That's probably not on the table for the Oilers. I think the only real recipe for the Oilers is they're going to have to pull what Florida did in the first round last year against Boston. They're going to need to win at least 2 games in overtime. I think that's really the only way the Oilers are going to be able to mitigate some of the real talent disparities when we're talking second pair, third and fourth lines. I think as the underdog, you got to look for any path forward, and it's going to be trying to win individual swing plays, because when it comes down to it, Dallas is probably going to have the puck a little bit more. And when you don't have the puck as often, you need to do more with less opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's what Dallas did well against Colorado in a lot of ways. They did not play with the puck as much as they did against Vegas, whereas they kind of just stayed pat, and when they got their chances, they buried them. They buried them against Colorado. You look at that game 3 where they were just getting hammered for that first period, and then they get their one chance and they score. And that has to be really, really defeating. And they played ahead for almost the entire series until the last few games, and then eventually they finish it. They finish it off in 6. Obviously, the thing that brings me a lot of comfort too is just the ability for the Stars to win on the road, even when they've lost game 1. They really struggle in game 1s under Pete DeBoer. I think they're 0-6 now with him at the helm. And home ice advantage really isn't what it used to be. It feels like, but winning on the road is something. And the Dallas Stars were the number 1 road team in the NHL. They win all 3 against Colorado. It was the best home team. Like, doing that just opens up a lot of avenues to win series, where you just feel like you don't have to be fantastic at home, or even if you lose 1 or even 2, like they did in the first round, it's like, okay, like we'll be okay. Like we'll go into the other building and find a way to win. And Stars have had some success in Edmonton. I mean, for years, it's been pretty documented. Dallas does pretty well in Western Canada, besides Vancouver. They can't find a way to get anything done there. But
Vancouver kicked our ass all regular season too. They were 0-4 in the regular season against the Canucks. They're 4-7 on the year against the Canucks. They just won the 4 important ones.
Yes. yeah. You got to win the important ones. So I mean, it'll be an exciting series for sure. So I'd love to hear maybe your official prediction. You have an inkling how many games is going to go, who you think's going to win. I know you maybe not be on the Oilers bandwagon for this one, but maybe McDavid can keep this one real close.
That's the
or
recipe.
Draisaitl.
The Oilers are going to need one of their superstars to have an out-of-body experience this round, like better than they've already played if they're going to win this series. I think the Stars are going to win this series, and I think in 6 games, I think the depth is going to be too much, and the Oilers Stars are going to do everything they can, but that's probably not going to be enough. It is hard to win when you only really have two lines contributing offensively and one defensive pair you can consistently trust. I think the depth is just too much. Perfectly feasible that someone on the Oilers goes nuclear and it forces a 6 or 7 games, but I have a hard time seeing how a team with an 880 goaltender can win a conference final.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why they play the games. So, right. You got to play.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, I completely understand. And that's a tough task. That's a tough task when you don't have that over 900 save percentage or even 930 in a lot of degrees. Like that's just where we are in the modern day NHL. And if you're a Stars fan, you have to feel pretty good about having Otter in net because he just kind of gets better as the game wears along, as a series wears along. He just gets better, and maybe that's the decider in this one. I have the Stars in 6 as well. They've been really, really good on the road. I think if they can get one of the first 2 at home, and then you're gonna like your chances. And I'm interested to see where the series is after 4 games. I think that'll be a really key to see where Edmonton's going to be, right? If they're 2-2, I think if you're Oilers, you're like, this is great. Like we have a chance. We just got to steal one here, maybe.
Sign me up for that all day.
Yeah.
If it is 2-2 after 4,
yeah.
as an Oilers fan, you feel great because all you got to do is 2 out of 3. That's a lot more doable than 4 out of 7. Even though it doesn't seem like it technically, 2 out of 3 is a lot more doable than 4 out of 7.
No, absolutely. So yeah, if we're 2-2 coming home, I mean, Stars, you're probably thinking, oh, you probably had a missed opportunity here and there, and maybe there's a few overtime games, as you mentioned, where Edmonton wins a couple of those, and then you got a series, and I'm sure everybody would love to see that. Of course, I would love to sweep, just move on, but that's that ain't gonna happen at this time of year. So very, very excited for this series to get underway. The Western Conference Final, the 9th time in history the Oilers and Stars are meeting. It has been a while. It has been a while since these two teams have met. So very, very excited. Any final thoughts before we get out of here, Nick?
If Connor McDavid can get a little bit healthier and he can go Super Saiyan, the Oilers absolutely make this a series.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait to see how it plays out. The Stars are one of my favorite teams in the entire league to watch. They play a very aesthetically pleasing style. They have a lot of tempo. They're along the puck a lot. It's just unfortunate it's going to be against the Oilers.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. Well, I would love to see Connor McDavid go Super Saiyan a few times. Not a ton. Okay. He's the one guy in the league. You just get extremely nervous when he has the puck on his stick, but that makes for some excitement. Alrighty, well, that'll do it for your official Stars versus Oilers series preview. A bid to the Stanley Cup is on the line. Looking forward to watching Game 1, and then, of course, the rest of the series here in the next few weeks. Thank you, Stars fans, Oilers fans, or anybody that joined us today to preview this Western Conference Final. Be sure to follow Locked On Oilers. Be sure to hit the subscribe button for Nick. Show him some love throughout the series just for some in-depth talk on Edmonton. Sauce me a follow as well on Locked On Stars, and maybe we'll catch up later on in the series or who knows. But very, very, very excited to watch this thing unfold. Thank you, Nick, as always. Appreciate it. Love to catch up with you, and we'll have to do it again sometime, or maybe in the off season once again with the the draft and stuff rolled around. Alrighty, that'll do it for the official Western Conference Final preview, and we'll see you again. So long, everybody.